The crystal towers of Zelani Prime caught the morning light like frozen rainbows. The city floated high above the gas clouds, held up by technology that was old when humans were still learning to make fire. For 3,000 years, the Zelani people had lived in peace. They had art, music, and science. War was something they only read about in ancient history books. High Counselor Lyrics stood at the great window of the council chamber. His tall, thin body was covered in pale blue skin. That seemed to glow in the soft light. Like all Zelani, he had large eyes that could see colors humans never dreamed of. His people were gentle. They solved problems with words, not weapons, but words would not save them now. The first ships had appeared 3 days ago. Black, twisted things that looked more grown than built. They moved through space like hungry insects, and they brought death with them. The Vortex swarm had found the Zelani worlds. How many more ships? Lyrics asked without turning from the window. Council member Varix checked the display with her 4-fingered hands. Her voice shook as she spoke. 200. More just entered the system. That makes over 1,000 now. And our defense fleet? Gone. The last ships were destroyed an hour ago. Lyrics closed his large eyes. The Zelani had 12 ships. 12 beautiful vessels designed for exploration and trade. They had been destroyed in minutes. The Vorthic bioships had torn through them like they were made of paper. Another council member, old Jorix, spoke from his floating chair. The evacuation ships? 3 made it out, Varix said. The rest were caught trying to leave orbit. The room fell silent. Everyone knew what that meant. Millions of Zelani were trapped on the planet below. The Vorthic would come for them soon. These creatures did not take prisoners. They consumed everything living and moved on to find more. We have to try the beacon, Lyric said finally. The other council members looked at each other. The emergency beacon was their last hope. It would send a message across the galaxy asking for help, but who would answer? The Galactic Council had already written off the Zelani worlds. They said the Vorthic could not be stopped. The nearest council fleet is 6 weeks away, Jorix said. We do not have 6 hours. Then we send it to everyone, Lyrics replied. Every species, every world. Someone must help us. Varix worked at her console. The beacon is ready. What message should we send? Lyrics thought for a moment. What words could make someone risk their lives for strangers? Send this: ancient enemies threaten all life. We seek any who might stand against the darkness. We will share all our knowledge for salvation. Please help us. The beacon launched into space, carrying the Zelani's desperate plea. It would reach every corner of the galaxy. Most who heard it would ignore it. Some might feel sorry, but do nothing. The beacon traveled far beyond the safe worlds of the Council, into the dark regions where dangerous species lived. It reached a yellow star at the edge of known space. The star had a small blue world that most species feared. The Galactic Council had marked it with warning signs. Quarantine zone. Extreme death world. Do not approach. The creatures that lived on this world called it Earth. They called themselves humans. The galaxy knew little about them except whispered stories. Stories about a species so violent they had survived on a planet that should have killed them. A world with poisonous air, crushing gravity, and deadly weather. Most aliens believed humans were myths. The smart ones hoped they were Captain Jake. Sullivan was drinking coffee in his quarters when the message came in. He was a big man with gray hair and scars on his hands from old fights. His face was weathered like old leather, and his eyes were the color of winter storms. He had spent 20 years as a Marine before joining the space. Service. The communication officer's voice came over the speaker. Captain, we're picking up a distress signal. It's on all frequencies. Sullivan put down his coffee cup and walked to the bridge. His ship, The New Horizon was not built for war. It was an exploration vessel designed to find new worlds and make contact with alien species. But Sullivan and his crew were not ordinary explorers. They were volunteers who had signed up to represent humanity among the stars. "Let me hear it," Sullivan said. The alien voice was high and musical, speaking in the trade language most species used. When it finished, the bridge was quiet. Everyone understood what they had heard. Somewhere out there, people were dying. Dr. Lisa Chun was the first to speak. She was small and quick, with bright eyes behind her glasses. As the ship's science officer, she knew more about alien species than anyone else on board. "Captain, the Zyani are pacifists. They have no weapons, no military. If the Vorthic are attacking them—" "I know what it means, Doc," Sullivan said. He had heard similar pleas during his time as a Marine. Civilians trapped by enemies they could not fight. Lieutenant Commander Pete Rodriguez looked up from his station. He was the weapons officer, though the New Horizon did not carry many weapons. "Sir, we don't know anything about this Vorthic swarm. They could have hundreds of ships." "Probably do," Sullivan agreed. "That's why the Zelani are calling for help." The communication officer, a young woman named Kelly Barnes, turned in her chair. "Captain, I'm reading the location data. The Zelani system is 4 days away at maximum speed." Sullivan studied the star chart on the main screen. The Zelani worlds were far from any council space. No help would reach them in time. He thought about the voice in the message, the fear and desperation he had heard. Chief Engineer Tony Blake spoke up from the back of the bridge. He was a practical man who liked to fix things. "Captain, with respect, we're not a warship. We have some defensive weapons and about 40 crew members. If this swarm is as dangerous as they say—" "I know the odds, Chief," Sullivan said, but someone asked for help. The bridge fell silent again. Everyone knew what the captain was thinking. The New Horizon was small and alone, but they were human. Humans did not walk away when someone needed help. Sullivan turned to his crew. These people had followed him across the galaxy. They trusted him to make the hard choices. "We all signed up to represent humanity out here. This is what that means. When someone calls for help, we answer." He looked at each face on the bridge. "I won't order anyone to do this. If you want to stay behind, I'll arrange transport back to Earth, but I'm going to help those people." Nobody moved. Nobody spoke of leaving. Rodriguez smiled grimly. "Well, Captain, it's been boring lately. Time to see what these bugs are made of." Dr. Chun nodded. "The Zelani are good people. They don't deserve this." Chief Blake sighed and shook his head, but he was smiling too. "Guess we're going to war in a science ship. This should be interesting." Sullivan felt pride swell in his chest. This was why he loved his crew. They were brave and decent, willing to risk everything for strangers they had never met. "All right then," he said. "Set course for the Zelani system. Maximum speed, and send a message back to Earth Command. Tell them we're responding to a distress call." The New Horizon turned toward unknown space, carrying 40 humans toward a battle they might not survive. Behind them, Earth continued its slow spin around the yellow sun. Ahead lay darkness and the unknown enemy, but humans had never been good at staying out of fights, especially when innocent people needed help. They were about to remind the galaxy why most species were afraid of Deathworlders. 4 days later, the New Horizon dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Zelani system. What Captain Sullivan saw through the view screen made his jaw clench tight. He had seen war before, but this was something else. The beautiful crystal cities of Zelani Prime were burning. Smoke rose from the floating towers like black tears against the pale sky. Around the planet, hundreds of dark ships moved like hungry sharks. They were not built like normal spacecraft. These vessels looked grown instead of constructed, with curved hulls that gleamed like insect shells. "My God," Dr. Lisa Chun whispered from her station. She stared at the scene with wide eyes behind her glasses. "They're destroying everything." Lieutenant Commander Pete Rodriguez was already at his weapons console, checking their limited arsenal. "Captain, I count over 300 enemy vessels. Most of them are the size of destroyers or larger." Sullivan studied the enemy fleet. Vorthic ships moved in patterns that reminded him of swarming ants. They surrounded the planet completely, cutting off any chance of escape. As he watched, several of the alien vessels opened fire on the remaining Zalani structures. Bright energy. Beams struck the crystal towers, shattering them like glass. "Any word from the Zalani government?" Sullivan asked. Communication Officer Kelly Barnes shook her head. "Nothing on the official channels. I'm picking up scattered emergency signals from the surface, but they're getting weaker." Chief Engineer Tony Blake moved to stand beside the captain. "Sir, we need to be smart about this. One ship against that many. We won't last 5 minutes in a straight fight." Sullivan nodded. Blake was right. The New Horizon was not a warship. She carried some defensive weapons and a few dozen nuclear missiles, but nothing that could match a fleet this size. But that did not mean they were helpless. Humans had not conquered their deadly homeworld by fighting fair. "Doc, what do we know about these Vorthic?" Sullivan asked. Dr. Chun pulled up her files on the main screen. "Not much. They're an insectoid species from the outer rim. Hive mind structure, meaning they all follow a central intelligence. They've been expanding for about 50 years, consuming everything in their path." Consuming? "They strip worlds of all organic matter. Plants, animals, even bacteria. Nothing is left alive." Sullivan felt cold anger building in his chest. He had seen evil before, but this was genocide on a galactic scale. What about their weaknesses? Unknown. No one has ever fought them successfully. Rodriguez looked up from his console with a grim smile. "Well, Captain, nobody's tried human tactics." Yet, before Sullivan could respond, the communication system crackled to life. A harsh, clicking voice filled the bridge. The universal translator struggled to make sense of the alien speech. "Unknown vessel, you have entered Vorthic territory. Identify yourself or be destroyed." Sullivan walked to the communication station. "Open a channel." The main screen flickered and showed the interior of one of the enemy ships. What Sullivan saw made several crew members step back in shock. The creature facing them was a nightmare made real. It stood nearly 8 feet tall, on 6 legs that ended in razor-sharp claws. Its body was covered in black chitin that gleamed like metal. 4 arms extended from its torso, each ending in hands that could tear steel. But the worst part was its head. The thing had no face as humans understood it. Instead, there was a collection of eyes, mandibles, and sensory organs that clicked and twitched as it spoke. When it opened its mouth, rows of needle-sharp teeth were visible. "I am Queen Vexstar of the 9th Swarm," the creature said. Its voice was like grinding metal. "You are far from your quarantine zone, Deathworlders. We have heard stories of your kind." Sullivan kept his expression calm. Inside, he was measuring the enemy. "I'm Captain Jake Sullivan of the Earth vessel. New Horizon. You're attacking innocent people." The alien queen made a sound that might have been laughter. Innocent. A meaningless concept. The weak exist only to feed the strong. These Zalani have served their purpose. The purpose of being slaughtered? The purpose of providing biomass for the swarm. Their cities will be consumed. Their people will feed our young. This is the natural order. Sullivan felt his anger growing, but he kept it under control. Anger without direction was useless. "I have a different idea." How about you pack up your bugs and leave? Queen Vextar's head tilted in what might have been curiosity. One ship, 40 Deathworlders. Against 300 vessels and 50,000 warriors. Your reputation for madness appears accurate. Counteroffer, Sullivan said calmly. Leave now, and we won't have to show you what humans are really capable of. The alien queen's mandibles clicked rapidly. Your species survived one dangerous world. Impressive, but you cannot survive the swarm. We will add your biomass to our stores. Perhaps your aggression will improve our warriors. The communication cut off. Sullivan turned to his crew. Every face showed the same expression he felt. These creatures were not just enemies. They were evil in its purest form. All hands, battle stations, Sullivan announced over the ship's communication system. This is not a drill. We are engaging a hostile force. The bridge became a blur of activity. Rodriguez powered up their weapons systems. Barnes began monitoring enemy communications. Blake checked their engines and power systems. Dr. Chun prepared the medical bay for casualties. Captain, Rodriguez reported, I have 24 nuclear missiles and the defensive laser array. Not much against a fleet that size. Then we don't fight them like a fleet, Sullivan replied. We fight them like humans. The enemy was already moving. A dozen Vorthic ships broke off from the main group and headed toward the new horizon. They moved in a perfect formation, following the commands of their hive mind without question. Incoming vessels, multiple contacts, Barnes announced. They're trying to surround us. Sullivan smiled, and several crew members shivered at the expression. It was not a nice smile. It was the smile of a predator that had found its prey. Chief, give me everything the engines have got. Take us straight at them. Blake's eyes went wide. Sir, that's the exact opposite of standard procedure. Good thing. We're not standard. The new horizon accelerated directly toward the approaching enemy ships. The Vorthic formation hesitated, confused by the suicidal charge. Their hive mind had no reference for this kind of behavior. At the last moment, Sullivan gave the order. Fire everything. The human ship unleashed its entire missile load at point-blank range. 24 nuclear warheads detonated in the middle of the Vorthic formation. The aliens had never faced atomic weapons before. Their bioships were tough, but not tough enough to survive direct nuclear hits. 6 enemy vessels were destroyed instantly. 3 more were crippled and drifting. The remaining Vorthic ships scattered in panic, but Sullivan was not done. Ram that one, he ordered, pointing at a damaged enemy ship. Sir? Blake asked in shock. You heard me. Ram it. The new horizons. Reinforced hull struck the wounded Vorthic vessel like a hammer. The alien ship broke apart, spilling atmosphere and crew into space. The human ship's hull was dented but intact. Damage report, Sullivan called. Minor hull breach on Deck 3. Emergency teams are sealing it now, Blake reported. Engines are still good. Rodriguez was laughing at his station. Captain, the enemy fleet is... They don't know what to do. Their formation is completely broken. On the communication channels, the Vorthic were chattering in their clicking language. The universal translator was picking up words like impossible and insane and Deathworld tactics. Queen Vextar's voice came over the speakers again. No. Longer calm and confident. What are you? Sullivan opened the channel, so his face appeared on every Vorthic ship. We're human. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day. We learned to be creative. The enemy queen hissed something in her own language. Then she spoke again in the trade tongue. You destroyed 12 ships. You still face hundreds. Then send them, Sullivan replied. We'll show you what happens when you mess with people under human protection. The new horizon turned toward the planet, where Zelani survivors were still sending desperate signals for help. Behind them, the Vorthik fleet was regrouping, but their perfect formation was gone. They had tasted defeat for the first time, and they did not like it. Sullivan looked at his crew. They were scared but determined. They knew the odds were still against them, but they also knew something the Vorthik did not understand. Humans did. Not fight to win. They fought to protect what mattered. And that made all the difference. The New Horizon dove toward the planet like a falling star. Behind them, the Vorthik fleet was trying to reorganize after the shocking attack. Captain Sullivan knew they had maybe 10 minutes before the aliens figured out how to respond. Kelly, scan for Zelani survivors, Sullivan ordered. Focus on the largest cities. Communication Officer Barnes worked frantically at her console. I'm getting signals from the capital city. Sounds like they have some kind of underground shelter system. How? Many? Maybe 100,000 people. But Captain, there are Vorthik ground forces all over the surface. Thousands of them. Dr. Lisa Chun looked up from her medical station. Captain, we can't land the ship. The New Horizon isn't built for atmospheric combat. Sullivan had already thought of that. We're not landing the ship. We're landing ourselves. Chief. Engineer Tony Blake shook his head. Sir, we have 40 crew members. Even if we all go down, that's not enough to fight thousands of aliens. We don't fight all of them, Sullivan replied. We fight smart. The captain turned to his weapons officer. Pete, how many shuttlecraft do we have? Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez checked his display. 4 shuttles. Each one can carry 10 people in full combat gear. Perfect. Here's the plan. We take 3 shuttles down to the surface. 1 team secures the Zelani survivors. The other 2 teams hit the Vorthik ground forces. Dr. Chun looked confused. Captain, how do 40 humans fight thousands of aliens? Sullivan smiled that dangerous smile again. By being human. 20 minutes later, 3 shuttles launched from the New Horizon. The remaining crew stayed behind to keep the ship moving and avoid the Vorthik fleet. Sullivan led the first shuttle with 12 Marines. These were not regular space crew. They were volunteers who had signed up for the dangerous job of first contact with hostile species. Sergeant Amy Foster sat across from Sullivan in the shuttle. She was a tough woman with short red hair and arms covered in tattoos from her time in the Earth military. Her combat armor was black and covered with equipment pouches. Like all the Marines, she carried weapons designed for fighting in space and on alien worlds. Captain, what do we know about these bugs? Foster asked as she checked her rifle. They're big, they're mean, and they eat everything, Sullivan replied. But they think like a hive. Take out their leaders, and the rest get confused. Private Danny Wright, barely 20 years old, but already a veteran of 2 alien contact missions, spoke. Up from the back of the shuttle. Sir, how do we tell which ones are leaders? The big ugly ones giving orders to the other big ugly ones, Sullivan said. This got some laughs from the Marines, which was what he wanted. Keeping morale up was important before a fight. The shuttles entered the planet's atmosphere and immediately came under fire. Vorthik flyers, creatures that looked like giant wasps with metal wings, swarmed around them. But the shuttle pilots were good. They dodged and weaved through the attack, using the shuttle's speed to avoid the alien weapons. Landing zone in sight, the pilot announced. Looks like a park near the city center. I can see Vorthik ground forces moving toward the civilian shelters. Sullivan looked out the window and saw the enemy for the first time on the ground. The Vorthik warriors were even more terrifying than their queen. They stood 7 feet tall on 4 legs, with 2 arms that ended in claws that could cut through metal. Their black armor looked like it was part of their bodies. They moved in perfect coordination, like parts of a single organism. But what made Sullivan's blood boil was what they were doing. The aliens had captured several Zilani civilians and were dragging them toward what looked like organic pods. Dr. Chun had been right. These creatures consumed other life forms. "Change of plans," Sullivan announced. We hit the ground running. No time for setup. The shuttles landed hard in the park. Before they had even stopped moving, the Marines were jumping out with air, weapons ready. Sullivan was the first one out, his rifle already firing at the nearest group of Vorthic warriors. The aliens had never faced human weapons before. Their armor was designed to stop energy beams, not solid bullets moving at high speed. Sullivan's first shots punched right through a warrior's chest plate, dropping it instantly. "Spread out," Sergeant Foster yelled. "Don't let them surround you." The Marines scattered across the park, using trees and monuments for cover. They moved in small groups, supporting each other with covering fire. The Vorthic tried to charge them, like they had charged the peaceful Zilani, but humans fought back. Private Wright found himself face to face with a Vorthic warrior that stood twice his height. The alien swung its massive claws at his head. Wright ducked and put 3 bullets into the creature's stomach. When it fell, he jumped over its body and kept running toward the civilian shelters. "This is crazy," he shouted into his radio. "They're huge. So what?" Foster's voice came back. "We killed bigger things back on Earth." She was right. These aliens were dangerous, but they were not the most dangerous thing humans had ever faced. Earth had taught humanity to fight predators, survive disasters, and never give up. The second shuttle landed on the other side of the city. Chief Blake led this team, even though he was an engineer and not a soldier. But every human on the New Horizon had basic combat training. On a ship that might face unknown dangers, everyone needed to know how to fight. Blake's team hit the Vorthic from behind while they were focused on Sullivan's Marines. The aliens suddenly found themselves caught in crossfire. Their hive mind had not prepared them for this kind of tactical thinking. "Target the ones with the fancy armor," Blake called out. "Those are probably the leaders." The third shuttle headed for the civilian shelters. Dr. Chun was on this team, along with the ship's medical staff and a few Marines for protection. Their job was to get the Zilani survivors to safety. The shuttles had landed in a maze of broken crystal buildings and burning wreckage. Dr. Chun had to step carefully to avoid cutting herself on the sharp fragments. She had been in dangerous situations before, but never anything like this. "Doc, this way," called Corporal Lisa Martinez, one of the Marines assigned to protect the medical team. "I can see the shelter entrance." The shelter was built into the ground beneath the city. Its entrance was hidden behind a waterfall that had been turned red by the fires above. Zilani civilians huddled inside, their large eyes wide with terror. High Counselor Lyrics was with them. The tall alien leader looked like he had aged years in the past few days. His glowing blue skin was pale, and his hands shook as he approached. "The humans, you came," he said in the trade language. "You actually came." Dr. Chun pulled off her helmet so the aliens could see her face. "We're here to help. How many people do you have down here?" "Nearly 90,000 now. More keep arriving as your people drive off the Vorthic." Chun looked surprised. "We're driving them off?" Through her radio, she could hear the voices of the Marines on the surface. They were laughing and joking as they fought, treating the battle like a dangerous game. But the Vorthic were not laughing. Their clicking voices carried notes of confusion and fear. Back on the surface, Sullivan had found something that made him very angry. The Vorthic had set up what looked like a processing center. Captured Zilani were being prepared for consumption. The sight filled him with cold rage. "Amy, bring your team over here," he called to Sergeant Foster. Foster arrived with 6 Marines, all of them breathing hard from the fighting. "What do you need, Captain?" Sullivan pointed at the processing center. "We're shutting that down. right now. The Marines looked at the facility, and their faces went hard. They had all sworn an oath to protect innocent life. What they saw here violated everything they believed in. "With pleasure, sir," Foster replied. The attack on the processing center was swift and brutal. The humans showed no mercy to creatures that tortured civilians. In minutes, the facility was destroyed, and the Zelani prisoners were free. But the real victory was happening across the city. The Vorthic ground forces were retreating. They had never faced an enemy that fought with such individual creativity and fierce determination. Their hive mind could not process the chaotic human tactics. As the sun set over Zelani Prime, Captain Sullivan stood in the ruined park where they had first landed. Around him, his people were helping Zelani civilians and treating wounded. The immediate threat was over, but he knew this was just the beginning. High Counselor Lyrics approached him, moving carefully through the debris. "Captain Sullivan, how can we ever thank you?" Sullivan looked at the alien leader, then at the city they had helped save. "Just remember this day. Remember that when someone calls for help, good people answer." But even as he spoke, Sullivan could see the Vorthic fleet regrouping in orbit. The Queen would not give up easily. The real fight was just beginning. Queen Vextar stood in the command chamber of her flagship, watching the reports come in from the planet below. Her mandibles clicked with anger and confusion. In 3,000 years of conquest, the swarm had never faced anything like these Deathworlders. "Report," she hissed to her subordinate, a smaller Vorthic with scars across its carapace. "The ground forces are in full retreat, my queen. The humans fight like nothing we have seen before. They do not follow patterns. Each one acts differently." This was the problem. The Vorthic were a hive mind. Every warrior, every ship, every decision flowed from the central intelligence of the Queen. It made them incredibly efficient against normal enemies. But humans did not think like a hive. Each human brain was separate, making individual choices that the hive mind could not predict. How many warriors have we lost? 12,000 on the surface. 37 ships in orbit. Queen Vextara's eyes glowed with rage. 12,000 warriors lost to 40 Deathworlders. It was impossible, but it had happened. "Pull all forces back to the outer system," she ordered. "We will regroup and plan a new attack." But Captain Sullivan had other ideas. The New Horizon hung in space between the planet and the retreating Vorthic fleet. Sullivan stood on the bridge, watching the enemy ships pull back into defensive formation. His crew had returned from the surface tired but victorious. They had saved nearly 100,000 Zelani civilians. "Captain, the enemy fleet is withdrawing," reported Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez. "Looks like they're heading for the junk point." Sullivan's eyes were cold as winter steel. Where do they think they're going? Dr. Chun looked up from her medical reports. "Captain, we won. The Zelani are safe. Maybe we should let them leave." "No." Sullivan's voice was quiet but firm. "These things don't just attack one world and stop. They'll go somewhere else and do this again. How many more innocent people will die if we let them escape?" Chief Blake shook his head. "Sir, they still outnumber us 10-1. Our ship took damage in that last fight." "Then we don't fight them ship to ship," Sullivan replied. "We hunt them." The word sent a chill through the bridge crew. Humans were predators by nature. For millions of years, they had hunted the most dangerous creatures on their deadly homeworld. Now they were going to hunt across the stars. "Set course to intercept," Sullivan ordered. "We're going after them." The New Horizon accelerated away from the planet, chasing the retreating Vorthic fleet. But Sullivan was not planning a direct attack. He had something else in mind. "Kelly, I want you to scan their formation. Look for supply ships, command vessels, anything that looks important." Communication Officer Barnes worked at her console. "Captain, I'm detecting what looks like a food convoy. 6 large ships carrying biological matter. Sullivan's jaw tightened. He knew what that biological matter was. It was the remains of worlds the Vorthik had consumed. Entire civilizations reduced to food for the swarm. That's our first target. The human ship caught up to the supply convoy at the edge of the system. The Vorthik food ships were huge and slow, designed to carry massive amounts of organic material. They had only light escorts. Sullivan waited until the convoy was far from the main fleet before attacking. The New Horizon came out of hyperspace right in the middle of the formation. Weapons already firing. The attack was over in minutes. 4 supply ships were destroyed, their contents scattered into space. The other 2 managed to escape, but their cargo was lost. The escort ships never had a chance to send a warning. Queen Vextar learned about the attack when the surviving ships limped back to the fleet. Her rage was so great that several nearby warriors backed away in fear. "They followed us," she hissed. One ship followed the entire swarm. Her advisor's voice was uncertain. "My queen, perhaps we should call for reinforcements from the whole world." "No," the queen's voice echoed through the ship. "We do not run from prey. We are the predators here." But even as she spoke, Queen Vextar felt something she had never experienced before. Fear. These humans were not acting like prey. They were acting like hunters. Over the next 3 days, the New Horizon struck again and again. They hit fuel depots and ammunition ships. They attacked isolated scouting vessels and communication relays. Each strike was quick and brutal, leaving the Vorthik fleet weaker and more confused. The humans used tactics that made no sense to the hive mind. They attacked at random times from unexpected directions. They used the wreckage of destroyed ships to hide their approach. They even broadcast false surrender messages to lure enemies into traps. Dr. Chan worked around the clock, studying captured Vorthik equipment and biological samples. "Captain, I think I've found something important," she announced during one of their brief rest periods. "What is it, Doc?" "The Vorthik aren't just a hive mind. They're chemically linked. They use pheromones to coordinate their actions. If we could disrupt those chemical signals." Sullivan leaned forward. "Keep talking. I've been analyzing their ship atmospheres. Each vessel pumps out specific chemical markers that tell the others what to do. If we could jam those signals or send false ones, we could make them turn on each other," Sullivan finished. "Doc, you're brilliant. Within hours, Chief Blake had rigged the ship's communication array to broadcast false Vorthik pheromone signals. The first test came when they encountered a group of enemy patrol ships. The New Horizon approached the patrol openly, broadcasting the chemical signal for friendly forces. The Vorthik ships were confused by the mixed messages their sensors were receiving. By the time they figured out the deception, human missiles were already on the way. But the real success came when they used the false signals to turn Vorthik ships against each other. By broadcasting conflicting orders, they caused 2 enemy squadrons to attack each other, thinking they were fighting human infiltrators. Queen Vextar watched her fleet tear itself apart and realized she was facing something she had never encountered before. These humans did not just fight with weapons. They fought with their minds, using deception and psychology as tools of war. The final insult came when the humans began broadcasting on all Vorthik frequencies. But they were not sending threats or demands. They were sending something much worse. "This is Captain Jake Sullivan of the human vessel New Horizon," the voice said in perfect Vorthik language. "You picked the wrong species to mess with. We know where your home world is now. We know how many ships you have left. And we know you're scared." The message was accompanied by detailed intelligence reports about Vorthik fleet positions, supply lines, and weaknesses. Information that should have been impossible for outsiders to obtain. "How?" Queen Vextar demanded of her advisors. How do they know these things? The answer came from an unexpected source. One of her captured warriors had been rescued during a human raid and brought back to the fleet. But something was wrong with it. The warrior was speaking in the human language, using human expressions. Dr. Chun had not just studied Vorthic biology. She had figured out how to reprogram their chemical signals. The rescued warrior was still loyal to the hive, but now it thought the hive's best interest was to serve humanity. "My queen," the reprogrammed warrior said, "the humans offer terms for surrender." Surrender? Queen Vextar's voice was filled with disbelief. "We do not surrender to prey. With respect, my queen, we are no longer the predators here." The words hit Queen Vextar like a physical blow. For the first time in her long life, she understood what it felt like to be hunted. The humans had turned her greatest strength against her. The hive mind that made the Vorthic so efficient had become a weapon in human hands. Across the fleet, more warriors were beginning to question their orders. The chemical signals that once unified them were now sources of confusion and doubt. Ships were deserting, running back toward Vorthic space with news of the terrible Deathworlders, who fought like demons and thought like gods. Queen Vextar stared at the tactical display showing her shrinking fleet. In 1 week, the humans had reduced her mighty swarm to less than half its original size, and they had done it with a single ship and 40 crew members. "Signal the human vessel," she said finally. Tell them we wish to discuss terms." For the first time in Vorthic history, a queen was about to surrender to her prey. The meeting took place in neutral space, halfway between the human ship and what remained of the Vorthic fleet. Captain Sullivan walked into the shuttle bay of the New Horizon wearing his dress uniform. He looked calm, but his crew knew better. The captain was ready for anything. "You sure about this, sir?" Sergeant Foster asked as she checked her sidearm. "Could be a trap." Sullivan adjusted his cap and looked at the 12 Marines who would accompany him. "Everything's a trap, Amy. The trick is being the bigger predator." Dr. Chun carried a briefcase full of analysis reports and peace proposals. Chief Blake had portable jamming equipment in case the Vorthic tried anything clever. Lieutenant Commander Rodriguez stayed behind to command the ship, with orders to open fire if the negotiations went wrong. The meeting place was an old Zelani space station that had been abandoned during the first Vorthic attacks. Its crystal. Corridors were dark and cold, but it was neutral ground where both sides could meet safely. Queen Vextar arrived with 20 of her largest warriors. Even after everything that had happened, she was still an impressive sight. Standing over 8 feet tall in her bio-armor, she looked like death itself. But Captain Sullivan had seen death before, and he was not impressed. "Captain Sullivan," the alien queen said in her clicking voice, "you have caused considerable damage to my fleet." "Your fleet was attacking innocent people," Sullivan replied calmly. "I stopped you. You are one ship, 40 individuals. We are thousands." Sullivan smiled that dangerous smile his crew knew so well. "We're thousands, past tense. How many ships do you have left, Your Majesty?" The question hit like a physical blow. Queen Vextar's mandibles clicked with anger. In 1 week, the human had reduced her mighty swarm from over 300 ships to barely 100. Half her warriors were dead or missing. "You fight without honor," she hissed, using deception and trickery instead of honest battle. "I fight to win," Sullivan said, "and to protect people who can't protect themselves. If you call that dishonorable, I can live with that." Dr. Chun stepped forward with her briefcase. "Your Majesty, we've prepared terms for a ceasefire, if you're willing to listen." The alien queen looked at the small human woman with contempt. "You offer terms to us? We are the superior species. We have conquered 100 worlds. And we kicked your butts with 1 ship," Chief Blake said bluntly. Maybe it's time to reconsider who's superior here. Several Vorthic warriors hissed and moved forward, but Queen Vextar stopped them with a gesture. She was learning that humans did not respond to intimidation the way other species did. "What are your terms?" she asked. Finally, Dr. Chun opened her briefcase and pulled out a tablet. First, immediate withdrawal of all Vorthic forces from Zelani space. Second, return of all captured civilians and stolen resources. Third, no further attacks on peaceful species. Impossible. The swarm must expand or die. It is our nature. Sullivan leaned back in his chair. Then die. I don't really care which. You choose. The blunt words shocked the Vorthic delegation. They were used to enemies who begged for mercy or tried to bargain for their lives. Captain Sullivan was offering them a simple choice: change or be destroyed. You cannot destroy all of us, Queen Vextar said, but her voice lacked conviction. Want to bet? Sullivan asked. I've got 40 humans who are really good at solving problems. Your hive mind is just another problem to solve. Dr. Chun pulled up a holographic display showing Vorthic fleet positions. We know where all your remaining ships are. We know your supply lines, your communication codes, and your tactical patterns. We can predict your moves better than you can. How? One of the Vorthic advisors demanded. Because we studied you, Dr. Chun replied. We learned how you think, how you fight, how you organize. Knowledge is a weapon, and we're very good at using weapons. Chief Blake activated his portable display, showing technical schematics of Vorthic ships. We also figured out how to turn your own biology against you. Those pheromone signals that control your hive mind, we can jam them, fake them, or reverse them. Want a demonstration? He pressed a button on his device. Immediately, half the Vorthic warriors in the room began acting confused. They received conflicting chemical signals that told them to attack and retreat at the same time. The effect lasted only a few seconds, but it made the point. Queen Vextar stared at the humans with something approaching respect. You turned our greatest strength into a weakness. That's what humans do, Sullivan said. We adapt. We overcome. We find ways to win, even when we shouldn't be able to. The alien queen was quiet for a long moment. Around the table, her warriors waited for orders that did not come. For the first time in her life, Queen Vextar was unsure what to do. What do you offer in return for surrender? She asked finally. Not surrender, Sullivan corrected. Partnership. We help you find a better way to live. Dr. Chun pulled up new displays showing agricultural worlds and resource-rich asteroids. The galaxy is full of uninhabited planets, places where you can expand without hurting anyone. We can help you develop sustainable food sources that don't require consuming other species. You would help us? After we attacked innocent people? Sullivan nodded. Everyone deserves a chance to be better than they were. Even you. The words were so unexpected that several Vorthic warriors stepped back in shock. They had expected death or slavery. Instead, the humans were offering friendship to their enemies. Why? Queen Vextar asked. We are your enemies. We would have consumed your species if we could. Because that's what humans do, Sullivan replied. We protect people who need protecting. We help people who want to change. And we give everyone a chance to be better. The negotiations continued for 6 hours. The Vorthic delegation argued among themselves in their clicking language while the humans waited patiently. Finally, Queen Vextar made her decision. We accept your terms, she said. The swarm will withdraw from Zelani space and cease attacks on peaceful species. In return, you will help us find new worlds and new ways to feed our people. Sullivan stood and extended his hand. Deal. The alien queen looked at the offered hand with confusion. What is this gesture? It's called a handshake. It's how humans seal agreements. Queen Vextar extended one of her clawed hands and carefully grasped Sullivan's much smaller human hand. The sight of the massive alien queen shaking hands with the human captain would become famous throughout the galaxy. 3 months later, Captain Sullivan stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt Zelani space station. Through the windows, he could see human and Vortex ships working together to establish the first joint colony on a previously uninhabited world. High Counselor Lyrics joined him at the window. The Zelani leader looked much healthier than he had during the dark days of the invasion. "Captain, how can we ever repay you for what you've done?" Sullivan smiled, but this time it was a warm expression instead of a dangerous one. "Just remember this when someone else needs help. Pass it on." Dr. Chun approached with a tablet full of reports. "Captain, the Galactic Council wants to meet with us. They're offering humanity full membership and a seat on the Security Council." "What did you tell them?" "That we'll consider it. But first, we have other work to do." She was right. Word of the human intervention had spread throughout the galaxy. Dozens of species were requesting help with their own problems. Pirates, slavers, and aggressive neighbors all suddenly seemed less threatening when humans might get involved. Sergeant Foster joined the group, still wearing her combat armor. "Captain, we just got another distress signal. Some species called. The Corvani are being attacked by automated war machines from an ancient civilization." Sullivan looked out at the peaceful scene of former enemies working together, then back at his crew. "Well, what are we waiting for? Someone needs help." As the New Horizon prepared to depart for another rescue mission, Captain Sullivan reflected on what they had accomplished. They had proven that humans belonged among the stars, not because they were the strongest or the smartest, but because they were willing to fight for others. The galaxy was a big place, full of dangers and wonders. But now it had protectors who would answer when someone cried for help. Protectors who came from a small blue world that had taught them the most important lesson of all. Sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to care about something bigger than yourself. And nobody cared quite like humans did. The New Horizon jumped to hyperspace, carrying its crew toward their next adventure. Behind them, 2 former enemy species worked together to build a better future. Ahead lay unknown dangers and new friends waiting to be saved. It was exactly the kind of life Captain Jake Sullivan and his crew had signed up for when they decided to represent humanity among the stars.